Hello, my name is Eleke Bayam. Welcome to my talk titled High Impact Research and Effective Scientific Writing. During this talk, I'll tell you 3 tips for excellent research and 7 tips for high impact publications. The key indices for successful graduate studies are the quality and also quantity of your research publications by way of conference papers, journal papers, and possibly invention patent applications. I'm discussing basically from my experience that helped me to win the highest PhD dissertation prize of the IEEE Polytechnic Society. So 3 tips for excellent research. The first is that you must have a great supervisor. In summary, your PhD or your graduate studies experience cannot be better than what your supervisor permits or is capable of helping you to do. So you must be careful in selecting your supervisor. I wouldn't stress this too much, but for me, I think it's the most important factor. Everything else that I'm going to say builds on the assumption that you have a supportive and effective supervisor. The second point is that you need to acquire the taste for excellent research. That is, you must become the manager of your graduate research. Well, your supervisor is only like the guide rail to caution you when you're going off track. And at the start of your research, your supervisor might be like the person who is the expert in the field of your work. But by the end of your doctoral studies, if you're doing a PhD, especially, you're supposed to be the expert in your topic and know it much deeper than your supervisor even understands it. So in acquiring the taste for excellent research, I'm going to mention 6 steps summarized as CAS4. That is, you need to collect, acquire, seniors, submit, fill early, and write. Number 1, you need to collect the top 10 literature that relate to your work. Top 5, this top 10 are divided into 2. The top 5 related to your proposed research area, and the top 5 of your PhD supervisor's research area. And if you're doing masters, you're graduate students. So let me just assume that everybody listening is a PhD student. But if you're a master's student, just tick what relates to you here. So you need to collect the top 5 publications of just in your field. Now, top 5 impactful publications, okay? Top 5 impactful publications in really high impact journals. You need to also collect your supervisor's top 5. Now, the first 5 are supposed to give you direction and bring you to speed in respect of what is the trend in your research area. The next 5 are supposed to help you to acquire your PhD supervisor's writing style, logical way of thinking, and communication. All right. The second thing you need to do is to acquire. You need to acquire a writing structure style that is standard from this literature that you've collected. Every successful publication, for instance, a journal paper, is a convincing story. So you need to acquire the taste, acquire the ability to present your story in a convincing manner. Seniors, it's going to help you in your journey as a PhD student if you have seniors in your lab or your research group who you can watch, who you can study, who you can even assist in their work. You may not get any credit for what you're doing for them, but it's going to speed you up. You can do a lot, achieve a lot. You can move faster by observing them and asking them questions. Seniors are very important. They can speed up your progress. Then I encourage you to submit papers to the highest ranked outlets in your field very early. And how early? Within the first third of your studies. Now, if your PhD program is 4 years, just understand that you have only 3 years to do all your work and even like publish all your work. Okay, let's even say to do all your work. So within the first third of your program, you need to submit papers to the highest ranked journals. Now, why do I encourage this? I encourage this to accelerate your learning curve. You need to learn how the reviewers think, to learn what they look out for, right? Fail early, because your doctoral dissertation will only be as excellent as your published articles. You need to target the top journals in your field, especially the top 5%, because these are the most prestigious. But worst case scenario, target the Q1 journals. Do not give up. There will be disappointment along the way. But never forget that failure is an incident and not a person. Failure is what happened and it is not you. So if you ever fail at anything, just understand that you are not a failure, but failure was just what happened for you to learn from and recover from. In my experience, for instance, I tried to operate by this principle right from the start. So in the first 27 months of my own 4-year program, and let me just say something. I mentioned the one for 3 people who are doing a 3-year PhD. So if you're doing a 3-year PhD, you need to complete all your work within 2 years. Because the last year is just like summarizing your results and defending your dissertation. But if you're doing a 4-year PhD, then you have only 3 years to collect all your work, to get all your results, and then the final year to report it in a dissertation and defend it. So for me, in my first 27 months, I aim to submit to IEEE transaction journals, and all my 5 submissions, first 5 submissions were rejected in the first 27 months. But somehow I was also submitting to other Q1 journals and later on got them accepted. But that was toward the end, right? So I experienced a lot of failures too along the way, but that's why I encourage you to fail early. It's better if you fail early than to fail at the end. So W stands for write a lot. Write your insights and summaries for future use, because writing skill only gets better as you practice. If you just keep on reading and reading and you're not writing, then it's not going to really help you to grow as a writer. So write a lot. As you're reading, summarize. As you're reading, put all these things in an organized manner, because all this will still be useful when you're like writing your papers or your dissertation later on. Okay. So I've talked about the second point, which is acquiring the taste for excellence research. And I believe that if you follow those 6 steps, you would acquire the taste for excellence research. Let me read this quote by Ira Glass, that what nobody tells you as a beginner, and that I really wish someone told me this, is that all of us who do creative work, we get into it because we have a good taste. So if there's something in you that desires to produce outstanding research, that's why you're even doing a doctoral study in the first place. But there's a gap. For the first couple of years, maybe months for you as PhD students, you make some stuff, but it's just not that good. It's trying to be good. It has potential, but it's not yet up to that standard. But your taste, the thing that got you into the game, is still killer. And your taste is why your work disappoints you. And if you're just starting out or you're in this phase, you got to know that it's normal. And the most important thing you can do is to continue doing a lot of work. Put yourself on a deadline so that every week you finish one story. That how field is story writing, right? Was to finish some work. Put tight deadlines on yourself. It's only by going through a volume of work, excellent work, that will close that gap. And your work will be as good as your ambitions, right? So you've got to fight your way through. It may not be easy, but you just have to fight your way through. Never give up. The third point for excellent research is that innovation makes the greatest impact. You see, to graduate from a doctoral program, you must make original contribution to your field of study, right? And original contribution by definition, for instance, by the University of Sydney's website, original contribution is defined as generating a new idea, applying new methods to existing data, creating new interpretations of existing data, providing additional support for existing theory, and so forth. The whole list is there. But I found out that if you want to publish high impact work, you must be innovative, right? You must make a significant level of innovation. And what is innovation? It's creativity plus technical implementation. Creativity plus technical implementation. And what creativity is the ability to produce original and unusual ideas or to make something new or imaginative. All right. So if you want to just get by in publishing, like just any paper, then you can go through the other kinds of contribution here. But if you want to do high impact research in your studies, in your doctoral work, then you must go the innovation way. You must really be novel in your outputs. So you can get creative by asking yourself some questions that what are the problems or limitations of the prior art? You can find that from literature review. What ideas can I generate to improve or overcome these limitations? Can any of the prior art used for a different application be applied to a new scenario? Look at it now. Just this year, the winners of the Nobel Award in Physics were given the award for their contributions, seminal contributions to the field of artificial intelligence. Now, that means that if you, for instance, can develop a strength in AI and apply it to almost anything that others have been doing, that's also innovation, right? So that gives you a new chance because not so many people have applied AI to many problems in most traditional fields. So you can go on with asking all these questions basically to go through the creative process, right? You must also be aware that there are creativity bounds, okay? You need to focus on ideas that are achievable with accessible resources, equipment available to you, whether in your lab or in a lab that you can visit as a visiting researcher. You need to be aware of the finances that you have or make efforts to maybe apply for new grants to help you to do more work. So you need to also focus, I encourage that you focus first on research topics that are within the expertise of your research group, because your supervisor is going to be able to give you the best support in the area of strength, in his or her area of strength. All right. So you must, I encourage that if you want to be speedy, you must understand what your research group is strong in doing. And first of all, get your initial results in that area of strength. Then you can go beyond that. Idea begets idea. When you can generate your first big breakthrough, then you can create some baby breakthroughs related to that. Technical know-how is only achieved by practice, like for instance, studying codes or models that have been done by others before you, working on related simpler projects, collaborating on other people's projects, building prototypes, practicing experiments, and so forth. You must just keep doing and doing and doing and doing. So in summary, originality is the most basic for all published work. But if you want high impact work, you must be novel in your outputs. You must be innovative. All right. And then you cannot stop at just being innovative. You now need to publish it to your field, publish it to the community. And this is what I'm going to talk about next. 7 tips for high impact publications. First things first, bad research can only lead to a bad paper. So some people can do very, very good work. And if you write it well, it will lead to a successful paper. But some people can do bad work. And no matter what you do, a bad work would always lead to a bad paper. But some people who don't have good writing skills can do very good work and write it poorly, and it will be rejected. So it's important to also be aware that you must develop your writing skills. There are different kinds of publications, conference papers, transaction papers. Now, this is talking from the perspective of IEEE journals, because for anyone who's applying for high-level positions, you need to be aware that IEEE transaction journals are considered the most prestigious in the field of electrical engineering. So I encourage you to pay a lot of attention to publishing your work in IEEE transaction journals, especially at the early parts of your career, right? We have magazines, and all of them have different levels of maturity, as shown. But let me go straight to the element of paper writing. The most basic is the content, what you want to write about. That's the most important. The content, the story you want to tell. That idea must be strong. It must be beautiful. It must sound really interesting. Then the next thing is to now create a style that presents it in a very beautiful and easy to understand manner. Then finally, the format. But the most important is your content. Then you need to style it according to style and format it according to the journal's requirements. Starting with the title, you need to avoid titles that are too long. Keep your titles within 10 words. And I'm making reference to this publication by Professor Rodriguez, Blackberg, and Professor Kuro, How to Write Papers. keep your title as brief as possible. Then use keywords in your title. For instance, look at this. Someone did a research and titled the publication "A Novel Converter Topology with Improved Control and High Performance." But there are no keywords here. Compare this now with this next topic. Hybrid NPC neutral point clamped grid-tied inverter single phase photovoltaic energy system. Keywords. And why is it important to have keywords? So that your work can be found by people who are searching indexes, all right, or indices rather, indices. So if you do not use the right keywords, people will not find your work and therefore do not be cited. So use keywords. Then the abstract is a small summary of the paper in one paragraph, and that abstract should include the context, that is the background, the problem you're trying to solve, the solution that you proposed, and the conclusion. So it's just as if to say, is that like saying that that abstract is just a mini paper on its own. Your introduction should attract the reader. It must be interesting. You see, it must attract the reader and say, yes, please read more of this paper. Read what is in this paper. It's beautiful. I've done very serious work. And it's highly encouraged that every paper should have only one contribution for you to be able to communicate it in a convincing manner. For instance, many IEEE transaction journals tell you that you need to, for your first submission, your paper must not exceed 8 pages. And therefore, if you have too many contributions, you can't explain all of them in 8 pages in a thorough manner. So that's why one significant contribution per paper is encouraged, right? Less is more. Okay, look at this example now. That this paper, someone was trying to write direct torque control, DTC, with hybrid SVM space vector modulation with optimized MPC, model predictive control, neutral point balancing, NPC, neutral point clamped with reduced harmonic content for PV application. Now, you see, so many contributions in one paper, but it's now suggested that instead of having to lump all these things into one paper, then break them into 3 papers. In the first paper, write on the direct torque control with hybrid SVM for NPC. The second paper, write on the optimized model predictive control for neutral point balancing in neutral point converter. And then in the third paper, write on NPC for EV applications, right? So simpler is always better. Your contribution, which is your main content, must be clearly presented, all right? Define all nomenclatures. I see some people, when I review papers, I see some people introduce lots of non-standard abbreviations. By all means, avoid non-standard abbreviations that are not standard to your field. Avoid them. And if you have to create them, don't introduce more than 2 new acronyms in your paper. I've seen some papers where some people introduce up to 10 abbreviations, just their own innovative abbreviation, making the paper very difficult. Because every time you see that one sees that abbreviation, you need to go back to look for where you first saw it for the definition. It makes understanding the paper very difficult. So define your nomenclature and make your work as clear as possible. Science should be possible to be reproduced. So the idea of writing paper, when someone picks your paper and reads through what you described, they should be able to achieve your results exactly as you have it. So you should provide as much information that is possible for people to replicate that work, okay? The conclusion of the paper should not be a list of what has been presented in the paper, but should include insight on the contribution, assessing the pros and the cons, and your conclusion must be supported by the results in the paper. So do not present data that explains something and then arrive at a different conclusion at the end of the paper. No. For instance, now, if you have data in your work that defines the height of, let's say, a man, the height of a man, then in the conclusion, you now say that based on this data of how tall the man is, it must also be fat. It's not correlative because what you provided data about relates only to the height. So your conclusion must always be supported by the data you've presented. Then also be generous in referencing. Avoid unnecessary self-citations. And now, some IEEE journals have even put a standard that self-cited citations should not exceed 25% of the total number of cited papers. So always keep it simple. Always keep it very simple. The simpler, the better. See, two alternative ways of writing 1 + 1 = 2. But the one on the right-hand side, which simply says 1 + 1 = 2, is better in high impact publications. It's also important to be clear, avoid elaborate prose. Always tell yourself, what I've written, can someone understand it very easily? Ask yourself that question. Stick to IEEE formats and guidelines. Make sure your diagrams are high quality, easy to understand. I remember when I started my PhD, I used to have a little conflict. What I wouldn't say conflict, but it was like a confusion. When I wrote my initial set of papers and I give them to my supervisor, usually he looks at it, he just skims through it. And many times, that's when I started, the feedback I'll get is, the figures are not beautiful. And I'm like, this is electrical engineering. Why must my figures be very, very, very beautiful in electrical engineering? Well, they must be beautiful. Go and look at, if you look at journals like Nature journals and the top IEEE journals, the figures they are attractive. Sometimes it's as if some people hired even an artist to draw them. So you must draw beautiful figures, very clear. And bad presentation originates rejection because they're difficult to understand. Then in manuscript assessment, there are some metrics. For instance, the transaction on power electronics, IEEE transactions on power electronics, has different metrics. The first one is called the quality of presentation. 5 being the highest. So they rate the paper based on how clear, concise, and effective it was in its presentation, how effective the illustration and tables were, the use of correct English, and useful references to past work. These are the metrics used to assess the quality of presentation. The next one group relates to the technical presentation and accuracy. How valuable is what you've proposed for practicing engineers or researchers, technical and mathematical accuracy, the support with analysis and evidential experimental evidence, how rich is it is in engineering judgment and insight, is it interesting to readers, does it stimulate new ideas? And then when all of that's done, they now rate, the overall rating is done in this manner from a scale of 0. Okay, now here we have 1 to 10. 1 to 10. The one at the highest level is the one that can be considered a prize paper, but the one at the lowest level has no research contribution or technical impact. That is, it's not original, has no innovation. Then if you go on to the middle, it's some research contribution or technical impact. And that one, generally, look at the bottom here. Most papers must receive 7 or above to be recommended for publication in IEEE transaction on power electronics. Transactions on power electronics. So 7 and above means it must be good original research contribution or technical impact, or it must have very strong research contribution or technical impact. So in summary, excellent research starts with choosing a great supervisor, acquiring taste for excellent research, and never forget that innovation makes the greatest impact. To publish high impact papers, you must first of all do excellent research. Then you must write that research well, write it clearly, write it convincingly with experimental validation, or at least numerical validation for your field of work. The style must be appropriate, must be clear, must be concise, appropriate to the journal where you want to publish it. Every journal has their own standards, so make sure you abide by their style. And in IEEE, you must format with beautiful and clear figures and use language accurately. So I hope this presentation has been beneficial to you. Thank you very much for listening. You can follow me on social media handles.